So, you think you know all about the lavish lives of kings? How about a king who shared his dinner with a giant worm cozying up inside him? Or the court ladies whose beef-fat hairdos were crawling with lice and could go up in flames like a torch at the touch of a candle? And what do you say to a palace where the hallways were so fouled with human waste that it was only cleared out by royal decree, just once a week? This is the side of Versailles they don't teach you in school, and you're about to learn some facts that will shatter your image of royal luxury forever. Beauty steeped in sweat and rot. All right, are you strapped in? We're about to dive into a topic so fragrant you might want to crack a window. We're talking about beauty, the kind you see in paintings and movies about lavish balls, about Versailles, kings, and their courtly ladies. Except this particular brand of beauty was drenched in rot, sweat, and a stench so foul it would make your eyes water. Forget everything you know about hygiene. A hot bath, a relaxing shower. In those so-called glory days, that was considered a one-way ticket to the grave. Seriously. The doctors of the era were dead set on the idea that washing was lethal. See, they believed hot water opened up your pores, letting in every nasty disease imaginable, plague, smallpox, syphilis, you name it. Water wasn't a friend, it was the enemy. So how did they, get clean? They didn't. Or rather, getting clean is putting it generously. Best case scenario, you'd grab a rag, dampen it with vinegar, alcohol, or, get this, your own spit, and wipe down the most, strategically important areas, armpits, neck, face. Can you imagine? You're just smearing the grime and stink around your body, adding the sour tang of vinegar on top. That's not hygiene. It's a delusion. But wait, it gets worse. If some brave soul did decide to take a bath, it became a ritual of pure humiliation, especially for women. The man of the house would bathe first in the same tub, then his sons, and only at the very end, dead last, was his wife allowed to climb in. Can you imagine what that water was like by then? It wasn't water anymore. It was a cold, murky, filthy sludge, swimming with the hair and sweat of her entire family. Lovely. Now, bottle all that up in one place. To give you a sense of the sheer scale of the tragedy, the famous Palace of Versailles, the ultimate symbol of opulence, was in reality one giant stinking pit. That's a detail the history books tend to leave out. The smell was unbearable. Picture this cocktail, the sour stench of week-old sweat from hundreds of people, all desperately trying to mask it with a ton of cloying, heavy perfume. Add to that the aroma of mold from the perpetually damp walls and, forgive my bluntness, the distinct notes of unwashed laundry and urine, because proper toilets were also a rarity. That, right there, was the true atmosphere of the royal court. So the next time you see a powdered beauty in a lavish gown on screen, just remember, beneath those layers of silk and powder is a body that hasn't seen water in weeks, and chances are she doesn't smell anything like roses, a golden palace with corridors of feces. All right, strapped in? Today, we're taking a swan dive into the glitz and, well, let's call it the grime of Versailles. Yes, that Versailles, with its golden halls, extravagant balls, and the Sun King himself. The movies sell us on romance and luxury. I'm here to tell you how it really was. And spoiler alert, it did not smell of roses. So, picture the palace. It's huge, absolutely gigantic. Thousands of people are milling about. Aristocrats, servants, guests from all over Europe. Now, here's the kicker. For this entire horde, there were virtually no toilets. I'm serious. A couple of latrines for the king and his inner circle. And the rest? The rest were on their own, And they got creative. Every self-respecting aristocrat kept a chamber pot under their bed. After taking care of business, a courtly gentleman or lady would simply walk over to the window and empty the contents onto the street below, right onto the heads of passers-by. Can you picture it? You're strolling along, all powdered up in your silk stockings, and a warm hello from some duchess lands on your head. It was just another Tuesday. There was even a special cry for it, Gardy-loo, which was code for, watch out, shit's coming down. But hold on, there's more. What if nature called in the middle of a ball and your chambers were a long run away? Simple. You found a quiet corner. You could slip behind a heavy curtain, squat in an alcove by the fireplace, or find an empty stairwell. And voila, the corridors, the galleries, even the royal gardens were, in essence, one massive public toilet. Now mix the smell of expensive perfume, the sweat of thousands of unwashed bodies, and fresh feces in your mind. That was the true scent of Versailles. Here's something the history books won't tell you. A major leap forward in palace hygiene was considered to be a special decree from Louis XIV, ordering that the feces be cleaned from the corridors, a whole once a week. To grasp the sheer horror of this, you have to realize that before that, they were apparently just left there until they dried. And for the final detail, the cherry on top of this stinking cake. Toilet paper? Forget it. Best case scenario, courtiers used scraps of old cloth which were later washed, or just leaves from the garden. But the most common, down-to-earth method? Your own left hand. Yes, you heard me. And that is precisely why in high society it was strictly forbidden to offer your left hand for a greeting or to take food with it. Now you know why. So, the next time you see a picture of the gleaming palace of Versailles, just remember that behind that magnificent facade were hallways literally paved with, well, you get the picture. Welcome to the dark side of royal luxury. Luscious locks of lies. All right, my friends, ready for another dose of historical horror? Today we're talking about what was hiding beneath the most luxurious hairstyles in history. You look at those 18th century paintings, at those madames with literal towers on their heads, and you think, how beautiful, how chic. Let me tell you, it wasn't chic. It was a walking, stinking incubator for lice. To grasp the sheer scale of this tragedy, you need to understand these hairdos weren't just tall. They were full-blown engineering projects. Inside, a wire frame was used to support horsehair pads. Their own hair, along with extensions, was piled on top, generously dusted with flour-based powder. Then came the decorations. And oh, how they decorated. Flowers, feathers, ribbons, and, my personal favorite, model ships, complete with sails. Yes, you could have an entire frigate on your head. Cool, right? Now let's talk about what held this masterpiece together. Forget hairspray. The primary styling agent was beef fat. Simple, rendered lard. This sticky, smelly grease was slathered all over the structure to keep the hair in place. Now imagine wearing this hairstyle not for one day, or even two, but for weeks. The fat starts to go rancid. The stench is so bad it could kill a fly mid-air. But wait, there's more. That grease and your own body heat created a 5-star hotel and an all-you-can-eat buffet for lice. They didn't just live in there. They raised entire dynasties, feasting and breeding in paradise. So there she is, a noble lady at a dinner party, dripping in silk and diamonds, while a regiment of hungry parasites marches under her wig. The itching must have been hellish. But how do you scratch without destroying this tower and humiliating yourself? For that, my friends, they invented special scratching sticks. Another thing the history books skip over. These were elegant little tools, often made of silver or ivory, with a tiny hand on the end. And so, while smiling languidly at her dinner companion, she would slide this louse scratcher up under her wig and start furiously scratching away. Can you even picture that scene? But the suffering didn't end there. These towers on their heads were brutally heavy, causing chronic neck and back pain. Some ladies even slept sitting up to avoid ruining a hairdo that was styled only once every few weeks. And now, the rancid cherry on top. Fat and flour powder are, essentially, a combustible mixture. Imagine it, a ballroom, hundreds of candles, you turn your head a little too carelessly, and your magnificent hairstyle goes up in flames like a torch. And it happened. This was beauty that could literally burn you alive. So yeah, next time you see a portrait of a Rococo-era lady, don't admire her hair. Pity her, because beneath all that splendor lay pain, stench, parasites, and mortal danger. And here you are, complaining about a bad hair day. That's the dark side of glamour for you. A royal dinner with a side of parasites. All right, people, strap yourselves in. Tonight, we're not just going back in time. We're going to a real-life royal dinner. But forget the crisp baguettes and fine wines. On our menu today is splendor, filth, and parasites. Yes, you heard me. We're talking about how they feasted at Versailles under the Sun King himself, Louis XIV. So, get the picture. A magnificent hall, gold, velvet, powdered wigs. Now, let's take a trip down to the kitchen. Not just any kitchen, but the Queen's personal one. You think it was a temple of sterile cleanliness? Think again. Running directly over the very kitchen where the most delicate soufflés were being prepared for Her Majesty was the palace's main sewer line. And those pipes, to put it mildly, were leaky. Can you imagine that subtle aroma of raw sewage dripping, drop by drop, straight into the royal soups and sauces? Bon appétit. But hold on, that was just the seasoning. The main course was the meat. There were no refrigerators back then, and game was transported to the court from far away. To give you an idea of the horror, the meat would often start to spoil before it even hit the kitchen. They tried to save it by soaking it in vinegar and burying it under a mountain of spices to mask the smell of rot. And what was born in those putrid roasts and pâtés? That's right, new life. Here's a fact they'll definitely skip in your boring history class. Practically the entire court, including Louis XIV himself, was riddled with parasites. According to his own doctors, the Sun King had a giant tapeworm, a massive, multi-meter-long ribbon of a worm that lived inside the radiant monarch and happily shared every single meal with him. Just imagine it. The king sits down to his pheasant, while inside him, his own personal pet writhes in anticipation. But if the men could at least grimace or have a discreet scratch, for the ladies of the court, it was pure torture. You're sitting at a banquet, laced into a corset so tight, it feels like your ribs are about to crack. Inside, the spoiled food is staging a full-blown rebellion. Your stomach is churning, waves of nausea are washing over you, and sharp cramps force you to grit your teeth until they squeak. And what does etiquette demand? A graceful smile. You have to pretend this questionable pâté is the most divine thing you've ever tasted. You have to make small talk about the weather and poetry, while your body wages a desperate war against parasites. Can you imagine the cold sweat breaking out under your silk gown? That desperate battle with your own body, just to avoid humiliating yourself in front of the entire court? So, all that Versailles glitz, all those balls and galas, It was just a cheap gold veneer on a rotten core, a beautiful wrapper for pain, humiliation, and truly abysmal hygiene. The next time you see a lavish feast in a movie, just remember what kind of side dish was really being served. All right, buckle up. Today, we're diving into filth so deep it makes modern reality TV look like child's play. We're talking about childbirth, but not the kind where a husband holds your hand and caring doctors offer an epidural. No, we're talking about the original royal reality show, public births in palaces. Forget privacy. Forget dignity. Picture this. You are the queen. The contractions are hitting hard, the pain is hellish, sweat is pouring off you, and you are at your breaking point. And who's surrounding you? Not your husband, not your mother, but a crowd of sweaty, bearded men in wigs. Dukes, barons, ambassadors, ministers, all of them are gawking at you. Why? To ensure that the heir about to make his grand entrance isn't swapped at birth. Oh yes, the paranoia was so thick that the most intimate process in a woman's life was monitored by the entire royal entourage. They just stood there, whispering, stroking their beards, and waiting for the future king to pop out of you. Can you even fathom the horror? You're in agony, terrified, humiliated, and dozens of pairs of prying eyes are fixed on you. Just to give you a sense of the scale of this tragedy, during her first labor, poor Marie Antoinette actually passed out. Not from the pain, from the suffocating heat and the sheer size of the crowd. Her bedchamber was so crammed with people, there was literally no air left to breathe. The windows had been sealed shut to keep the queen from catching a draft, so she just blacked out from the lack of oxygen and stress. They had to smash the windows to let some air in. But wait, it gets worse. The humiliation and stress were only half the battle. This is where we get to the part they don't mention in history books, the real nightmare fuel. There was zero sterility. None. Whatsoever. The doctors and midwives didn't wash their hands. Instruments, if any were used, were never boiled. Now, add that same crowd of courtiers back into the mix. They'd come straight from a hunt, a feast, or their own filthy carriages. Their jackets hadn't been washed in months. They coughed, they sneezed, and they brought a whole bouquet of bacteria with them, turning the royal birthing room into a biological time bomb. The result? A monstrous, simply off-the-charts mortality rate. Postpartum sepsis, or childbed fever, mowed down queens and commoners alike. This is when an infection enters the bloodstream and the body begins to rot from the inside out. Sky-high fevers, delirium, agonizing abdominal pain, purulent discharge, the stench of decay would fill the lavish bedchambers before the mother had even drawn her last breath. The supreme irony is that those very dukes and barons, there to witness the birth of an heir, were the ones delivering a death sentence to both mother and child with their unwashed hands and grimy clothes. So, the next time you hear about the traditions of royal births, forget the quaint pictures of happy parents cradling their newborn. Instead, remember the bloody, humiliating, and lethal spectacle where life itself was on the line.